Hey guys, it's Misty with My Paper Cuts, and I'm coming back on with part 2 of my flower making series. And this one is all about the different materials, as in paper, I use. Um, I just wanted to go over some options and different things and show you kind of examples of what they look like when they're run through the molds, and some warnings about different things that may bother you when you do them, and just to show you that the options are truly endless when you want to make your own flowers. It's not just about, plain cardstock, you ink it up, you color it. There's just hundreds of options and different combinations that you could do. So I'm going to start out with, these are the two molds that I used for my samples just now. The regular one that's for all flowers, and then again, like I told you, my favorite one, which is the rose. And the first option I will show you is I just cut some out of just plain white cardstock. And the here is the result of the flower when it's molded. And so you can imagine, by layering this up and all of that, like the realistic looking flower that you're going to get. But this shows you the texture on the regular cardstock. So this is just plain ordinary white cardstock. And along those lines, I cut out two leaves. And here is the leaf when it is just cut out. And it's got those debossed lines in them. And that is great. It is great for your clean and whimsical style of crafting. But if you run that same leaf through this mold right here, you get this really cool texture that makes it more of a shabby or a vintage type leaf. So that just kind of goes to show you the realistic effects you can get. Now this one did go through sideways. You could run it through like so if you wanted your veins going in the right direction. But for me, it's just about the texture of it. Where this is pretty and it's kind of whimsical and clean, this one to me is a lot more my style, where I like the vintage texture. Not necessarily shabby, but it adds a layer of realism and lots of texture to that leaf instead of just being a flat leaf. So that is the regular cardstock. And then the next thing, which is the one I do most commonly, is pattern paper. So the pattern paper that I used was, I just grabbed a sheet out of this coffee pad here because it had so many. And I cut out of this piece. So this is the back of one of the sheets, and it's got that nice blue to it. But imagine if you were using this paper and you made a flower out of this pattern paper, it would match identically. So that's why I like to do that. And the only thing that I would caution is you may have to figure out your sandwich, or you may just have to embrace this. But these papers tend to have a white core, so they will crack a little bit and that white core could show through. Now there's tons of ways you could cover that up. You could just hit it with some ink, you could throw some glitter on it, however you want to do. But that is that pattern paper molded. And again, it goes to show you, the type of effect that you can get using the pattern paper to match your project. So those are my two most common, but then I will also get in and I will use mulberry paper. Now there are a couple of kinds of mulberry paper. This one, for all of us OG, old school crafters will recognize this kind of mulberry paper. I mean, this stuff is like, it's practically tissue paper. You can use this and you will get a very delicate and beautiful flower, but it's delicate. It's close to just being a tissue paper flower. It does kind of change the texture of it a little bit when you get it wet, so it kind of makes it a little easier to work with than this. But that is the type of molding you'll get from this type of mulberry paper. I don't even know if you can find this too easily anymore, but I still have a ton of it in my stash. And then there's also the thick mulberry paper, which is like this. So this stuff I got on Amazon, and it's much thicker, as you can see. And it comes in a pack like this, which is a rainbow of colors. And it's just on Amazon under thick mulberry paper. Like there's the dark orange. Some of them have other colors of fibers and some of them don't. But this is a nice pack because the sheets are just big enough that you can get quite a few flowers out of them, but you've got the whole rainbow of options. So that's the thick mulberry paper. And this is what the flower looks like when you run it through the mold. So it definitely picks up the texture, but it's a lot easier to work with. Oh, I must have overlapped those when I ran them through the die cutting machine. Oh well. But it definitely to me, it gives more of a, I don't know, you can kind of see it's the same texture, but for some reason, although the definition shows more on this type of mulberry paper, I think the texture is heavier on this one to me. And this is just much easier to work with when you start assembling than something like this. So mulberry paper is probably one of the more popular things to use when you're doing flowers. But the options still don't stop there. So the next thing you can do is vellum. And I actually have, this is just one of the things I have for vellum, but it's something I picked up at Tuesday Morning quite a while ago. But it is a whole pack of different colors of vellum, including in the back here. Yes, there are metallic vellums. So this is handy when I want to make a flower because the sheet is almost the perfect size just to make one flower. And there's a lot of different colors. So I have that, and just to show you what vellum looks like. Now vellum, it doesn't matter if you wet it or not because, you know, it's more of a plasticky type thing. But you will, if you're using a colored vellum or even the white, you will get some of this harsh creasing. But again, I think that adds to the charm of it. I think it adds another layer of depth to it. I love making vellum flowers this way. So that is the vellum run through. And then don't forget about your specialty papers. So I also have this paper pad from Hobby Lobby, and it's got lots of different foiled papers in it. So when you're looking at your pattern papers, those little bits of foil will show as well when you assemble your flower. I went ahead and cut this piece just because I figured this is what you guys would like to see. But it molds perfectly as well. So when you do a solid foil color, which I'm going to show in a second, one of the tricks is if you are spraying water on when you use these. So if it's got like a plastic coating on both sides, it's going to turn out more like the vellum. The water won't necessarily get in there and do what it needs to do, but if it is just touches of vellum, you'll get a or foil, you'll get a really good result. And don't forget your pattern papers that have touches of glitter as well. The stripes on this one are obvious, but using something like, I just saw one in here. Even this right here, when you run that through and make a flower, you're going to have like little lines of foil just randomly through the flower petal. So that would actually be quite pretty. And not just because it's a foil pattern or a flower pattern. Even these geometric ones with the foil, those would make very interesting looking flowers because you would have hints of foil throughout. So that is the that version. And then, of course, your regular specialty papers as well. You have your full foil, which again will work better if it has a paper backing and you can spray water on it so that the water can seep in and break up those fibers a little bit to accept the texture a little bit more. And then you can also do glitter papers. So anything with a coating on it is going to work okay, but if it has a paper backing that the water can get into, it's going to work even better. So those are just some samples of pre-made papers. Oh, there's one more. So sorry, I forgot. Watercolor paper. So this is a watercolor paper. And now I do not like the Master's Touch watercolor paper at Hobby Lobby for watercoloring on. I find that it pills a lot. I find it doesn't take the water, just it warps it. I just don't like it for watercoloring. However, and here's the big sheet of it. It has this great texture to it already, and I will use this for layering pieces. And it's a nice thickness. So I do buy the watercolor paper there when it's on sale for other uses, but I don't watercolor on it. But I do love to make flowers with it because you can use a watercolor on here and it will bleed throughout and make a wonderful washed color. But so don't forget watercolor papers as well. So, and then there's one more thing that I wanted to suggest, and hopefully I won't get too bad of a glare here, but you can also create your own paper with background stamps. These are 3 of my favorites to use to make my own paper for making flowers. I love the polka dots. It's really fun to do this for, you know, whimsical flowers or such. And then it's also really fun to use heat embossing with background stamps. You can add gold to your paper for flower making. I've also made rosettes with background stamps and heat embossing. You could do like a snowy effect and make a poinsettia with snowdrops on it, which is what I like to use this one for. And again, with the wood grain, I probably sound like a broken record, but this wood grain is just a beautiful pattern for anything. And then this is a really fun one. This is actually roses, which just seems like an obvious choice. But again, these lines add such cool pattern to paper when you're cutting it down into smaller pieces. It just adds like a neat texture. And especially if you were to gold heat emboss this or silver heat emboss this on like a black or even a white, you would get such an elegant look with a metallic touch. So you can also make your own paper for cutting out flowers by using background stamps or even your own stamps. So that's the suggestion for that. And one more piece of information that I thought might be worthwhile is, again, if you're using your embossing folders to do the texture, a fun way to add dimension is you can ink in these. So if you ink on this side, all of the indentations will have the ink. You just gently run your ink pad over the top. If you run it over this piece, then the ink will be pushed into the depth of your paper. So that is another really cool way to add interesting texture and dimension and color to your projects, is by putting ink into your embossing folders before you close them up and run them through your machine. So that is another interesting thing to do if you're using embossing folders for making flowers or any other time. So that is my video for now. That is just the basic different papers you can use and suggestions of options. You'll look at everything a little bit differently when you're looking at patterns when you start making flowers, because you'll see the flower before it comes out and how cool it can be to make actual custom flowers that match your pattern paper perfectly without having to pay Prima prices. All right, you guys, I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.